And one is being called the largest strike against a single employer ever in Canada. Thousands of members of the largest federal public service union in the country walked off the job today. Federal workers are hitting the picket lines after the Treasury Board and the Public Service Alliance of Canada failed to reach a deal by last night's deadline. Negotiations are expected to continue despite the strike, which started at 12:01 a.m. Wednesday morning. Union President Chris Aylward says that members are pumped and ready to walk off the job to fight for what they want in a new contract. The strike will affect many different departments and agencies, from passport processing to immigration to the RCMP. Well, joining us now to help unpack all of this is Ms. Sunira Chaudhri, employment lawyer and partner at Workley Law. Ma'am, welcome to Forum Daily.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
So, what do we know so far about the latest updates regarding these ongoing negotiations?
Well, what we know is that they're back at the negotiating table. And generally, when you hear that a strike is looming and you have that midnight deadline, that's usually when rubber hits the road. And even if a strike mandate begins, as is the case here, parties, both the union and the government, are going to be working around the clock here to get to a deal because a strike is often, the losers are not just the general public here, those that might not be able to file their taxes on time or those that might not be able to get their passport. It's really the workers. The workers are not going to be paid except for strike pay. It really places the workers here in a very uncomfortable position. So both sides are going to be working very, very heatedly to get to a deal.
And what exactly are PSAC members asking for in a new contract?
Well, we know that wage increases is a real sticking point here, as would be the case for any labor negotiation. And what's interesting here is that a lot of, if not all, of the contracts expired back in 2021. So the need for an increase in wages that would go retroactive to 2021 is certainly the big ticket item here, negotiating those wages retroactively through 2021, 2022, and 2023. But another big ticket item, of course, is what's the future of remote work for a lot of these federal workers. And I think that's going to, the terms and the boundaries around remote work, I think, is a sticking point here for both sides.
And how realistic are these contract stipulations that PSAC is trying to negotiate here?
Well, I think that the question about how realistic it is, I mean, generally speaking, one would always assume that wage increases would be par for the course for any labor negotiation. So that shouldn't surprise anyone. But of course, we were coming out of the pandemic in 2021. In fact, all the way through 2021, we were still being subject to lockdowns in the province of Ontario, at least. And so we know that remote work and the costs associated with creating a remote work framework cost the government a lot of money. We actually, I don't know that any employer, much less a federal government, would know what the cost of remote work and hybrid working arrangement would be. Of course, we know that the government has had to maintain large assets like buildings, the infrastructure around the maintenance of huge assets that largely sat empty in 2021 and have not been well attended in 2022 and 2023. And so that is the backdrop against which we have union workers or unionized workers looking for wage increases. We know that those costs have remained fixed and, in fact, might have gone up for the government. And so we're looking at much more spending, I think, this time around than in preceding collective bargaining negotiations for the federal workers.
All right, just about a minute left here, but bringing this back to our viewers, over 155,000 public service workers are walking off the job, including 35,000 Canada Revenue Agency workers. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the scope of this strike and how it will likely impact everyday Canadians?
Well, I think everyday Canadians should look very closely here to how the federal government deals with the request for wage increases, especially with respect to cost of living. All of us are feeling the pinch when it comes to the increased costs. How the federal government responds with respect to wage increases on this will be very indicative of how other union negotiations may go in the light of we know we have grocery retailers being put to task here on additional costs. So I think we're going to see an increase there. And another thing to look out for is how the federal government looks to create boundaries around remote work, because that will be the federal government plan for the future when it comes to remote work. So we will be waiting with bated breath to see what the federal government's plan is for remote work in the future and whether or not it is absolutely here to stay or not.
Lots to keep our eyes on. Again, Ms. Chaudhri, thank you again for your time today.
Thank you.